Hello guys, I'm Oluwatomisin Bello, a software engineer. I focused on front-end engineering and DevOps engineering, and I've been in the software engineering space for 3 years plus now, and mostly focused on web development also. So I'm here to introduce web development to you. So the next question is, why learn web development? So basically, my own definition of why learn web development is it's basically on all devices, right? So learning web development, you as a developer or as a product owner get to reach out to audiences in all platforms, from the Android phone, which also uses a web browser, to the iPhones, which is a web browser, or to the desktop applications, the desktop operating systems. So the reach. Today we have around 12.5 billion web-enabled devices, and also the virtual medium. Web development allows you to create interactive visual websites where users can play around with, users can do interesting things with your products, and yes, it pays well, right? So I've been working as a front-end engineer, and that's where I get most of my pay, right? And as a software developer, I've built projects on my own, push to the market, get my money, and it all goes well, right? So it's also important to do it well, right? While it's easy, while it's fun to learn software development, it's also important to do it well as a developer that wants to be world class, right? So this is very important. Now the question is, how does the web work, right? So to answer the question how the web works, you first have to understand what is the internet. So first, I want to break down things you've heard about servers, you've heard about front end, you've heard about back end, all these jargons right in your face, to break it down to that all servers or clients are all the same thing. They are just basically a computer, where one computer acts as the one giving out, and one other computer acts as the one receiving. So basically, the internet is interconnection of devices, right? So it's an interconnection of different devices, internet-enabled devices, from your phone to your iPhone to your laptop to your desktop, all connected in a particular network. That's what gives us the internet. So then some of these devices act specifically as servers, where they keep data, and then you have to access this data, right? And some also act as clients, and I'm sure everyone here would have, or everyone watching this video will be holding a mobile phone, and that mobile phone acts as a client. Whenever you go to a web browser, whenever you go to Facebook, whenever you go to Instagram, you are just a client where the data is being displayed to you and you have to interact with the data, right? Somewhere after interacting with that data, you're accessing a particular code that then gets filed from a server, and that is how the internet works. So when we now break down the front-end engineering and the back-end engineering, it simply means you decide that you want to focus on the client side of things, where data is being displayed, where you can interact with this data, so you can find unique ways to display that data to your user, to make your browser more fun to be on, to make your browser accessible. And that is what it means to work as a front-end engineer. While if you decide to work as a back-end engineer, you're saying, okay, I'm on the server part of things, I'm here to secure the server, I'm here to make sure that data is going as fast as it can from the server, and there is no lag behind that. So in this course, you will learn I think there are 3 different things, right? So this is outdated, so I just got this PDF from a friend. This is outdated. In this course, you will learn HTML5, you will learn CSS, you will learn JavaScript, and you will learning one of the front-end frameworks, which can be React or Vue or AngularJS, right? We won't be learning PHP. It's a scripting language used on the server side. So now there's the question of why learn HTML5, why learn CSS, why learn JavaScript? Because we all hear that there's React outside, there's Next.js, there's Gatsby. Why don't I just pick that up and learn and be a front-end developer? Well, you can do that, but then, like, there's this popular saying of when you build a house on a weak foundation, then the house tends to crumble later on. So that's what happens when you learn or you pick up React and you don't have the basic understanding of HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript. It becomes hard to make. It becomes complicated to even do the simplest things, right? So now, what's HTML5? Now, HTML5 is the current standard for a language that describes the contents of the web page. So let me read the slides and I'll come back to give a brief analogy. CSS is used to add styles to a plain HTML document. JavaScript makes the website dynamic, responds to user. And PHP is a scripting language used on the server side. Like I said earlier, if you're a backend engineer, this is one of the programming languages you will need to learn. We'll be looking at several JavaScript frameworks including jQuery, AngularJS, and React.js. Now, my best analogy to explain HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript is think of yourself as you're building a robot, an human robot. So, when you're building your robot, you first have to start with the structure of the robot, which is where the hands will be, where the head will be, and where the legs would be, right? Defining that structure is what something like HTML5 does. When you're building your website, HTML structures your website to say, let the header be in this place, let the body of the content be in this particular side of things, and let the footer of your content, right? You're defining the structure with HTML5, and then when you're moving on to the next step of your robot is probably decorating it, making it look unique, right? That's the CSS part of things. You're adding styles to it. So that's why I say humans are unique in different ways. We have different faces, we have different beautiful faces. This is what we call styling it. So CSS does that to your HTML document, and then JavaScript is what makes the website dynamic in the sense that it can perform certain operations based on an input and gives a response to it. So as the robot says, you've created a structure, you've styled it, made it look unique. Now you want it to actually function. You want it to be functional. You want it to work when it has to work. You don't want it to move its hands. You want it to run to a particular place. That's what JavaScript does. It adds programming to it, right? So the next thing we'll be covering in this particular tutorial should be HTML. So, like I said earlier, HTML is a markup language. It tells the web browser what content to display. With HTML, we separate content from presentation, and HTML has a set of predefined elements to identify content types. So there are things like H1, the P tag. If you've ever tried out your hands on programming or development, you must have heard of these things. Don't worry, at the end of this whole slide I'll do a demo and we'll walk through together with it. So tags are surrounded by angular brackets, and the closing tag is prefaced by /. So I think this is the best time for me to actually do a demo right? So I'll open up my VS Code and do a quick demo of So I didn't say this earlier, but one thing I love about web development is I have a background in engineering, and when I started out, there were so many parts of engineering that I could have focused on. There was the robotics part of things, the electronic part of things, because I'm an electrical engineer, and there was back-end engineering, there was a cloud engineering, and well, I didn't do any of them, right? Why? Because of costs, right? As a front-end engineer, you are using the cheapest tool to create the most incredible thing you can, the most incredible web application that you can. And what I have to do is just get myself my laptop, have a web browser, have my VS Code and the internet, and I'm good to go. Unlike robotics engineer that I had to buy some components or the other, or backend engineer where I have to pay for databases, I had to pay for hosting my application. We do that on the front end also. Also for cloud engineering, oh god, cloud engineering can run me dry, right? But front end engineering, I most times just use my laptop, my VS Code, and my browser for development. So I advise you also get yourself a VS Code, you get yourself a good laptop, and you're ready to become a front end engineer. So to create an HTML file, you just create a new file and you give it, you name it index, and it has the extension of HTML, right? So this is index.html. Now with VS Code, I can easily bring out the structure of how a front end, an HTML file should look, right? The initial structure, and you just do that by holding your shift key and pressing 1, which brings out the exclamation mark. As you can see, it says emit abbreviation, right? And you just click enter on that, and you have the simple structure of an HTML5 code. So back to our slides. So tags are surrounded by angular brackets, and the closing tag is prefaced by a forward slash. So when we talk about tags, we talk about something like this. This is an opening tag right here, and this is a closing tag right here, right? So the closing tag is prefixed with the front end, with the front slash, and the content are then put in between this tag. So this is an HTML structure. An HTML structure has an opening tag of HTML and a closing tag of HTML, and then it's now broken down into the head and the body. The head also has an opening tag and a closing tag. The body also has an opening tag and a closing tag. So we have so many so many tags, right, that is used in HTML5. But then how do we cram all this? Well, it gets a time to, as a developer, when you've built so many projects or you've worked with so many projects, some tags are just so easy to remember and you know how to use them. But then my go-to place whenever I want to understand certain things about a tag, I just go to Mozilla Firefox documentation, which is okay, let's say for example I want to ask what is the p tag. The p tag, hopefully Bing gives me a good response. Yeah, so it takes me to W3 schools, which is a very nice place, but then I usually find myself clicking on Mozilla because for me I feel it's more in-depth and it covers everything I need. But W3 school is a little bit it's user friendly, it's beginner friendly also, and it gives examples. So let me say example. Right, so how do I open this? Right, So now you can see this is the p tag, the paragraph element, and it gives a definition of what the p tag represents, or how is a block level element, and how it's used. You can see the p tag has an opening and a closing tag, and also has the content in it. So in HTML5, there are also what we call self-closing tags, right? So self-closing tags are tags that don't have a closing tag. So let me give an example quickly. So let's add a p tag here, which is a paragraph, and say welcome to GDSC, right? The best community to be. Right, so now how do we define this code in a browser? How do we view it? So it's as easy as just going to where this particular file is in your file manager, clicking on it, and it opens up in your browser. So I've saved that, Ctrl S. So if I go to where this particular folder is in my computer, it's going to be hard because it's been a while I've used Windows. Okay, let me open my terminal to see where I created it. Terminal. Come on, that's what I was pressing since. So the folder is located. Okay, I have my terminal. In users DV. So users DV will be users DV and then frontend. Right. If you click on this, you can see it already has like a favicon of the Edge browser, which is the browser that is on the system. And if I open it up, right, so it gives me the option of opening it with the Firefox or Microsoft Edge, right? So open it up with Microsoft Edge, and we have that, which is what we just defined. The paragraph, which is welcome to GDSC, the best community to be. So an example of a closing tag is the breaking tag, which a self-closing tag is the breaking tag, or the break tag, sorry, which I would now put into our code and just say BR, right? And if we go to our browser again, okay, let's save this first. Ctrl S. If we go to our browser and we refresh, you can see that took this particular statement to the next line. That's what the break tag does. But while it might be also nice to always go into your folder structure, click on the browser, and get to view your web page, there's a nice extension that you can add to your VS Code, which is Live Server. So you just go to your extension and you search for Live Server, right? So this one, and you install it. It shouldn't take long at all, right? So we'll come back to that. So let's go to our slide. What's next on the agenda? So now the HTML, as you could see, it had a tree structure where it had a parent, and a parent had a child. The child can also have children, like, so you had the HTML tag. In the HTML tag, you put a tag in between it, which was the head and body tag. In the head tag, there was a title tag. In the body tag, there was a p tag. So the tree structure is what is used in the HTML5. And later on, when you're learning about JavaScript, you get to learn things like DOM manipulation, where we talked about the document object model. So what that simply means is that everything on your web page is simply a document where you want to get each element, right? So you have a document, and then each of these HTML head, body, title, p, when they get rendered on your web page, they become elements, and these elements have or become elements which are also objects, right? These objects now have attributes. It means they have properties that because it's a particular head, you can get this attribute. Because it's a particular body tag, you can get a certain attributes from it, right? So let me give you an explanation of that. So this is our web browser, and I want to give an example of the tree structure or the document object structure. So I'm going to open up my inspect tool on my browser, which, if I'm correct, you can open up with Ctrl Shift I, right? If you don't do that, you right click on your mouse and click on inspect. Right, so it brings out the element. So this whole thing is a document. You can see the HTML tag, which is now an element, and you can see where it sets things like the HTML attributes, the layout, the event listeners, the properties of the HTML element, right? You see there's so many properties for that. So there are some general properties that are all parts of this particular in all HTML elements. They have general properties, right? An example will be the class name, the class list. Let me give a reference to where you can find the general properties. So let's go to the Mozilla. So let's close this. Alright, so you know what? Let's check attributes. Right, okay, we call them global attributes. Right, so global attributes, this is a list of all the global attributes. Right, some other elements have attributes that are only unique to them. An example will be probably the p tag or the span tag. So that aside, we understand that viewing the browser is just viewing a document that has elements in them, and each of these elements have attributes that we can manipulate to make certain things function, right? So I just want to have that mental model. A web browser or web page is simply a document which has elements that are objects. So when I say they are objects, it means later on when you learn about objects are things that I don't know how to explain the OOP paradigm in this class, but this particular head tag is an object, and an object will have an attribute and also functions that you can perform on it. So that's what it means by it being an object, also an element, right? So back to our slide, we're going to talk about the versions of HTML. So if you find something funny when I created this, unlike the structure we talked about, where we just had the HTML opening tag and the HTML closing tag, you see on line 1 we have the doc type HTML. So the question is, what is that doing there? Now that particular line of code specifies that this is an HTML5 version, right? So doc type HTML is how to specify the HTML5 version. So HTML has should I say grown from HTML 1.0 to HTML2 to HTML 4.4, and now we're at HTML5. I don't know when next we're going to the next version, where HTML5 is doing pretty amazing right now. But I think there's the HTMLX that people are talking about, but it's not widely accepted yet. In fact, there's a big controversy about it. So HTML5 is where we are at now, and to specify that a particular HTML file is of this version, you put that. Now why is it important? So it's important when you are rendering your website, right? And there are certain functionalities. So your website, when it takes your web page, it first reads the version that, okay, this is the version here, and there's some sensitive functionalities that have been outdated that shouldn't happen on this particular file, blocks them, and there's some certain functionalities that now, because you're using HTML5, you can implement them. It allows it, right? If you implement a particular function that you could only use in HTML5, like let's say there's this detail tag which is in HTML5, which you don't have in HTML4.4. If you change this to a version of HTML4.4, which I think is in the slide of how to version an HTML4.4, and yeah, the next line. Yeah, so to version an HTML4 doc type, you just do this, you add all this, you replace this with this, right? And now I was talking about the detail tag, right? So let's play around with detail tag is. So let's go back to our guide, which is HTML. Okay, so sorry, reference. So the guide is more of like a tutorial, while the reference is when you're looking for a particular so there's this details. So the details disclosure, right? So it's more like an accordion, but now it's inbuilt into HTML5. Normally we did this in other versions with CSS, where we had to use JavaScript. So when we click on this particular details, then open up, it renders this into a particular paragraph tag. But now this is coming automatically with HTML, right? We don't have to use JavaScript to implement it. So let's copy this and let's paste that. Yeah. Right? So now our live server is installed, which was the application we were installing earlier. And if you see, it brought out this particular unique should I say feature to our VS Code, where I can now click on this and it automatically opens this index.html into my browser. So what a live server does is creates a server actually. It opens up a port, right? So a port is basically like a way to get access to computer files. So it opens it up and you can see starting, and then it automatically takes me to the web page. Right. So I had to borrow a friend's laptop for the purpose of this video, and the laptop is pretty new to things that I have, like VS Code and all. Right, so and it's also quite slow, but it's opening up. Right, normally it's supposed to automatically take me to my browser, but if we see here, we can see we have port and then colon and 550, which is the port number, right? So let's open that in our browser ourselves. So open up a new tab. Let me exit from full screen. And in my tab, I just put in my local host. So when you're working in a network in IT in general, whenever someone talks about local host, they mean the IP address of your computer. It's usually local host, or you can also use 127.0.0.1, which is also defined as local host, which is I'm going to a network on my computer, and I then put the port number. So I put a colon, right, and specify the port number, which is 5500, and that automatically opens up the web page. You can see our detail tag and our summary, right? So this is interesting because HTML5 now has what we call accessibility, right? So it's easier for users that basically use their keyboard, or they are visually impaired, to go directly to details click on enter key and it opens, right? We usually had to do that with JavaScript, and people did it in so many different ways, and sometimes the web page will be accessible, sometimes it won't be accessible, and it was tricky. And HTML5 solves that by a lot of tags that now does that are well specified. I think that's the best thing to use, right? So you have tags that are well specified in terms of the header. You know what the header is in the browser, you know what the footer is, you know what the sections are. You have the audio tags, you have article tags. So when you're creating a blog, you can specify each article, and it's easy to just navigate through it. Right, so basics of HTML5, like I've talked about earlier, every HTML document or web page. So whenever I say HTML document, I'm also automatically meaning the web page consists of tags and character data. The tags are elements enclosed in angular brackets, so which is the HTML, the body, like we've seen before. We have an A tag, which is what we use for links. We have the body tag, and we have the so that's the closing body tag, and that's the closing HTML tags. Right, so opening and ending tag must be used together. Right, you can't open up a tag and close it with a different tag. So what do I mean? So we can do something like this. You have HTML here, right, which is a closing tag, and bring it and put it in between the body tag. This is automatically an error, right? Let's see if it renders, but I doubt it would, and it might actually. Let's reload. Oh, it did render, but then it's an error, a quite big error, right? So an HTML tag should have a closing tag with the body before it, because the body was opened in it. I don't know if that makes sense, right? So let's go to HTML. Yeah. Oh, okay, I didn't save it, because that should not have worked. So now I've saved it, and let's go back to rendering it. Oh, it still worked. Amazing. Right, but the right thing is HTML, the opening tags should enclose any tag that was opened in it, and it should be closed in it also. Let's save that. So our live server is now installed completely, so I'll close this. So the character data is what we put in between the HTML tag. So an element, like I said earlier, is a combination of tag and its character data. It's when it's all rendered on the page, right? So you have the title, and then you have things in between. It's the hello word, you have the body opening tag, the P opening tag, and you have welcome to the world, and you have this, right? So let's put all this into our demo. So we have the title of hello world, and let's see where that get rendered to. Word. So what changed? Can anybody notice? Well, if you didn't notice, this changed. Hello world changed, right? That's where the title tag goes. And the next thing in the slide was the body, which has a P tag that says welcome to the world. So back to our code. So the body now has a P tag. And say welcome to the world. Right? And then we have a link tag, which is A, and has href, which is the exact link you want to go to. So I'm going to copy and paste this instead. Right, copy it, yeah. And the last line is, okay, let's see how it renders first. Oh, I'm not saving, I'll say save. Right, so we now have this, and when we click on it, it should take us to google.com, right? So now you can see it says localhost / www.google.com. So what is that is doing is that in my link tag I put the href as www.google.com, right, without the https. So it just thinks the web browser just reads it as maybe like a URL to a domain, which is the localhost domain. It maybe thinks like it's another web page in your domain. So what I'll just do is, to be sure, I'll put an HTTPS, so it reads it as a link, and now www.google is its own domain, so it goes to www.google.com. And I'm saving that and reloading. I also open to a new tab. I'm closing this, and it's still going to Y. Okay, so this is a lifestyle I play with me right now. Alright, so come back to that. So it's possible to next elements inside other elements. It's possible to have empty element, no content, no character data in it. HTML tags are not case sensitive, so you can have a P tag, which is capital P, and a small closing tag, which is small letter P. But by convention, tags are written in lower cases, so it's helpful for me and you to be able to read the same code and understand it, right? So using the HTML tags as all lower cases, the standard thing everybody does. So by convention, tags are written in lower cases. Like I talked earlier, the HTML element has attributes, right? So we talked about, I gave examples, or I gave a reference to where you can find the global attributes, an ID, class, style, global attributes. An href is a unique attribute to the a tag, right? So where we specify the link. So some attributes can be used on any HTML element, which is the class attribute, the ID attribute, the style attribute, the title of the element, right? So let's see what all that does. So class specifies one or more class names for an element. So we usually use the class names to target an element so that we can then use that target in the CSS, right? And then the ID also, we could do that also. When we have an ID of an element, we then target the ID so that we can use that to style that element. But it also does unique things, as we'll be able to get that in JavaScript also. So the style tag specifies an inline CSS style for an element. So later on in the course, we'll talk about the different ways of styling an HTML page, and an inline CSS style is one of them. And to do that in an element, you just add the style tag and you specify the styling you want to add to it. The title specifies extra information about an element. So HTML comments. So comments can be added in HTML code to make it readable and understandable. So what it means is, as a developer, right, you will be writing code and you would want to leave certain information about the code you just wrote, maybe to yourself, right, so that you can come back and read it, understand it, or to other developers. In HTML, the way to do that is by using this particular syntax, which is the open angular brackets, the semicolon, the dash, then you put your content in it, which, as you can see in the example, says this is my comment, and then you close it with the dash and the angular closing bracket. So let me copy this straight to our demo and add it right here as the first line, and then I also save it. Something is wrong. And let's see. So in our HTML, you can see that we saved this. As you can see, saved, and we added this line on line 9, but we can't see it on the web browser. So that's what a comment does, right? The comment stays in the code, but it never goes outside of the code. So now to CSS, and the current version we have in CSS is CSS3. We've come a long way. So CSS stands for cascading style sheets, and styles are how define how to display HTML elements. Styles were added to HTML 4.0 to solve a particular problem, which is making our web pages look beautiful and nice. When we go to websites, maybe like they were built in maybe like 2000s, like 1996 thereabout. They were nice, right? The XP days, but they weren't beautiful, right? They were functional, but they weren't beautiful. That's it. They were like, we couldn't style a lot of things, right? Styles came to solve that problem. The original purpose of HTML was to combine the structure and content of the page into one document, right? When the presentation elements began to be included in the document, it increased the complexity and reduced readability. So initially, we used to add the inline styling to the HTML, where we used only HTML to style the page, right? But then after a while, it became complex and hard to read, because you didn't know the code. That okay, we know the code, you understand the code, but over time there was no separation of concern, right? So when developers wanted to debug that why was a particular thing not displaying, they didn't know what to tackle first, if it's the structure or if it's coming from the style they added to. So we'll talk about that, which is taking all the style elements. So we don't, inline style is possible, but as developers we are advised to always separate your styling files, right, and push it somewhere else. So we separate the style element from documents and put it in the style sheets. The advantage is the styles can be changed easily, and the document, which is the HTML document, is more readable. Like I mentioned earlier, we have three ways to do styling, which is the inline style, the internal style sheets, and the external style sheets, right? So the style elements are included in HTML as HTML attributes in the inline style. So we had a p tag that had a style attribute. So let's do that, right? So code. So we have this p tag, right? And remember we said inline styles, we just had the style attribute. So style, right? And we did something like this. That's funny. Sorry, it's a new laptop, so I'm looking forward. The keyboard setting is quite different, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, found it. 3. No, 4. No, I just found it right now. 6. Oh, so that 2. All right. Also, so we did that, and we just do. Let's see. Background color. Alice blue, right? So this is the style. What would I call it? Key, and this is the value. So when we look at our so this let's save that. So as you can see, the welcome to Word has a background color. I think let me put something more sharp. That's how we do red, so we can see the difference. And let's save that. Okay, so I think I'm always having the issue of saving, right? So I'm just going to auto save. How do you do that again? Somewhere there. Okay, auto save. Right, so anytime I make a change, the VS automatically saves it, and we skip that part. So now we can see the background color of red. That's how to apply an inline style. So there are many styles, right? And like I said, you can either go to the reference or you can go to a guide, which is more like a tutorial based learning. Or when you know what you're looking for, you just go to the reference, or you just go search it, look for the link that directs you to the reference and click on it. So let me show you the guides for CSS. So you have the CSS basics, which says everything about CSS. You have tutorials there, and you have the first steps to take, what is CSS, how it's structured, and the building blocks, right? The selectors, the pseudo classes. There's a lot to learn, but over time you just know what they are, right? That's after doing a lot of projects. Alright, so the next thing we're going to do is the internal style sheets. Awesome. Okay, so to answer the question of how to do the internal styling, right? We've done that already. We've done the inline styling, which is on line 11. Now we're doing the internal styling. So to do that, you go to your head tag and you add the style tag to that. So we just do style. Now remember when we talked about the class and the ID attribute for us to target the element, right? We can also target the element directly, right? So let's do that first. We have the P tag. So this means I'm targeting all the paragraph in the body, and I'm styling it to a background of blue. And when I save that, we have to save now, and go to the hello world. So let's close this, and let's close that, and open up. We have welcome to GDSC, the best community to be, in the blue background color. Now the question is, why did the welcome to word, which is also a paragraph tag, not change the blue to the blue color? So in CSS, that's what we call the looking for the word. It's somewhere in my head. It's not coming out in my head. Selector. Yeah, it's a selector, but then it's what we call okay. I'm just going to use a different terminology and just say which has more access. Alright, which has more power, right? So the inline style has more power than the internal style, and the internal style has more power than the external style. Let's just say the inline style is greater than the internal, and the internal is greater than the external. What means that when you style a particular element in the inline style, right? So the web browser picks this and forgets about any other style that comes with it. If we're talking about the same property of the background color, right? So if it's the external style, it also picks this first, right? Before picking the external. So let's do an external CSS. To do that, we just need the link tag, which we add to this, which is a style sheet, and then the href is the link to the CSS. So let's create a link to the CSS here and create a CSS file there. So the CSS, let's call it main.css, and link it, main.css, and then we go to our CSS file following the same syntax of P, and this time we're going to the background color of yellow. And let's see what happens. Okay, you know what? Let me add. Yeah, this should be okay. Oh, wow. So the external is greater than the internal, right? But not greater than the inline. So it goes like this: the inline is greater than the external, and the external is greater than the internal, as we can see here, right? So the external file overrode. Yeah, overrode is a word. So it's overrode the internal styling, right? So now, how do we separate particular p tag, right? Because I want this particular line 20 p tag to be a different color. So let me add another paragraph. Let's see, adding another paragraph. Oh, actually, I knew I was right in the first place. Probably I didn't save it or something, right? Because this is the way it should be, right? The inline is greater than the internal, and the internal is greater than the external. Yeah, that's the paradigm it follows. Okay, so now back to what I want to do. How do I separate these two p tag to have different styles, right? That's where the class attribute and the